Om Akhandamandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Hari Om. Readings from the Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi by Swami Gambhirananda. Page 21. In addition to these brief and casual references to her childhood days, some information can be gathered from her contemporaries. Thus, Sri Raj Mukherjee's sister Aghoramani Devi, a companion and playmate of the mother's girlhood days, said, "The mother was very simple by nature. She was simplicity incarnate. Nobody had any altercation with her during childhood sports and games, in which she very often played the master or the mistress of a house. She, of course, made dolls and played with them, but she preferred worshipping with flowers and bay leaves, Kali and Lakshmi in images fashioned by herself. When other girls fell out, she would mediate, settle their quarrels, and re-establish cordial relations. Once during the worship of the goddess Jagaddatri, Sri Ramhriday Ghoshal of Haldipukur was present. Finding the mother lost in meditation before the deity, he kept his eyes fixed on her for a long time. But as he could not make out as to who was the deity and who was the mother, he left the place in fear. Other old people would say, from her young days, Sarada was as diligent in her work as she was intelligent, quiet, and well behaved. She had never to be asked to work. Of her own accord and with her own resourcefulness, she would meticulously perform her duties." The self-identification of the mother with Jagaddatri in her meditation, which became pronounced enough to awe a casual observer, was not an isolated event in this unique life. The girlhood days of the Holy Mother were made surprisingly singular by a strange combination of divinity and humanity, with a predominance of the former, as it were. Whatever others might think of her in her later life, she then generally revealed herself in her human role. But at the time of which we are writing, it seems as though she stood at the meeting point of heaven and earth and could not decide as to which side she should lean, fresh as she was from the world above. Or it might have been that it was ordained from above that those early days should be divinely encompassed. So it is that the Holy Mother said with reference to those days, "Mind you, my dear, as a girl, I saw that another girl of my age always accompanied me, helped me in my work, and frolicked with me. But she disappeared at the approach of other people. This continued till I was 10 or 11 years old." Note: much later, after the passing away of the Master, she had another vision of a similar girl. See the chapter on With the Devotees. When she went into the water to cut grass for the cattle, there would appear a girl of the same age to assist her in the work. No sooner the mother returned from the shore after depositing a sheaf cut by a new girl than she would find another sheaf kept ready in the meantime. We have now an idea of how busy the mother was in her early life. From her reminiscences of those days, we also gather that she had off and on to undertake such hard tasks as cooking. But though she was a precocious and painstaking little girl, her hands were not strong enough for the whole arduous process, and so she had to call in her father for taking down heavy utensils from the fireplace. She had to fetch pitchers of water from the tank for domestic purposes, and she took this opportunity to learn swimming with the help of the pitcher. When she was 11 years old, 1864, the countryside was ravaged by a terrible famine. Her father had garnered some paddy, and though he was by no means affluent, he was moved so much by the appalling misery around that he opened his granary and started a free canteen. The Holy Mother described it thus: "What a dire famine raged there once, and how many starving people came to our house. We had stocked the previous year's produce. My father had the paddy husked into rice and got potfuls of khichdi, hodgepodge, cooked by mixing it with black lentils. Every day in this house we'll eat this," he said, "and offer it to whoever may come. Only for my Sarada a little rice of good variety will be cooked, and she will eat it." On some days, the number of people became so great that khichdi ran short. Cooking would restart at once. No sooner was the hot food served on the leaves than I would fan it with both hands so that it might cool quickly. For, alas, the hungry stomachs could not brook delay. One day came a girl of either the lowly Bagdi or the dome caste. The hair on her head had become shaggy for want of oil, and her eyes were bloodshot like those of a lunatic. She ran to the tub where some rice dust was soaked for the cattle and began gulping that. She wouldn't heed the people who were crying out, "Come in and eat the khichdi." Only after swallowing some rice dirt did she hear that call. So dreadful was the famine. After learning the bitter lesson of that year, people began to garner their paddy. From the vivid picture drawn up by the simple, unvarnished, and incomparable words of the mother, we find how busy she was seeking to cool by fanning with her soft, delicate hands the hot food for the starving people. She, who in future would reign in the hearts of hundreds with the irresistible claim of a mother. And how full of affection for that tender darling of a child was the poor Brahmin. The mother's life then was like that of any other girl in the village. But in the midst of this rural simplicity, now and then a sudden divine flash dazzles us. This interplay of light and shade could not perhaps entirely escape the notice of her brothers or of her parents, who wanted to hug to themselves their small sister or smaller daughter as any other human being did. Perhaps because of the unforgettable impression of such moments of light, Shyama Sundari Devi, mother of the Holy Mother, said in later life, "My child, I wonder who you really may be, my dear. How can I recognize you, my daughter?" The daughter, of course, then brushed this compliment aside with apparent dislike, saying, "Who am I? Who can I be? Have I grown 4 hands like any deity? If so, why should I have come to you?" What Sharada Devi did as a sister becomes clear from a talk that she had one day with her mother. Shyama Sundari Devi said, "Sarada, may I have a daughter like you in my next life?" The daughter replied with a show of anger, "You will drag me down again? To think that I should come again to bring up your children." With the memory of the quiet diligence of her affectionate daughter still fresh in her mind, Shyama Sundari Devi repeated with an obvious appeal, "May I indeed get you again, my darling?" Uncle Kali too once reiterated this compliment when he said, "Our sister is Lakshmi incarnate. She spared no pains to keep us alive, husking paddy, spinning sacred thread, supplying the cattle with fodder, cooking. In short, most of the household work was done single-handed by our sister. So welcome to the 7th week of our readings and reflections on Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi. This book that I am reading now was written by Swami Gambhiranandaji, and first 2 chapters have been completed. Last week we saw the argument put forward by Swami Gambhiranandaji that Holy Mother in her early age itself started manifesting her divinity in one method or other. He says that both divinity and humanity were combined in her personality, but the girlhood days of the Holy Mother were made surprisingly singular by a strange combination of divinity and humanity, with a predominance of the former, as it were. So when we go back to her early days and we see, and some of the incidents that Gambhiranji has shown here, the apt incidents, to indicate that Holy Mother in her childhood age itself started manifesting her divinity in many ways. For that, one simple incident that he quotes is about the neighborhood village Pandit who came to witness Jagadadri Puja in Jairambati. And he was sitting behind and he looked at the Murti that was there, Jagadadri, and the small little Sarada was sitting in front of him, and she was also looking at the Murti. Now he saw suddenly this strange thing there, that he could not differentiate between these two, and he could not know who is Jagadadri. Is she the Murti or is she in this little girl? Both appear to be same, and he got some fear in his heart, and he ran away from that place. That is one incident he shows. Another incident, the incident about her humanity, how she had a wonderful heart for those poor people who are struck by the famine. The famine is a great curse in any country. Even in Ireland, from the history we know how Ireland has suffered from the famine, and there was a mass exodus from this country to other countries in those days. So famine is a terrible curse. And at that time, her father had paddy stored from the previous year, and he was a good man, a pious Brahmin, and he used to be having feeling for all these poor people. He used to call and go out to the village and tell them, today we are cooking khichdi, please come. Khichdi is a combination of, it's translated as a hodgepodge in English. It is a combination of mixing with black lentils with rice. So there is a proportion, they say, either 50-50 or 60-40, like the proportions are used in preparing the khichdi. And then khichdi is very tasty, of course. Even today in our Indian centers, we serve khichdi as a prasad for the masses. And we find that khichdi is very tasteful. And during the puja days, the khichdi becomes extraordinarily tasteful. And even other days, in very cloudy days, sometimes in our ashrams we prepare khichdi. They are not so nice as on the puja days particularly. So we always remember Mother, how Mother used to be running with a fan in her hands, and with those little hands she would fan the khichdi and make it cool and then serve the people there. And when the people are perspiring, sitting and eating khichdi, she would stand by those villagers and fan them also. And that is a wonderful way that the humanity aspect has been shown here. And another aspect for her divinity is also written here, that how she was recollecting her days when she used to go to Amodha river. As we saw earlier, that Amodha river is to be called very fondly by Holy Mother as her Ganges. As we know that Ganges is a holy and most auspicious river, and this little girl used to call it Ganges, and she would go for taking bath there. And she explained to others that whenever she would go to Ganges to take bath, she would see another girl of her same age coming with her. Not only while taking bath in the river she could see, actually she could see during her ordinary day-to-day activities, like for instance cutting grass, going to the field and cutting grass, and she would say that, oh, how wonderful it is. That girl would come and a sheaf of grass she would cut and put it in one place, and she finds another sheaf is already there. That girl whom mother used to see, she would come and put it there. So this type of strange things had happened in her life. And one of the pitiable incidents during this famine, Swami Gambiranji quotes on the words of Holy Mother. So Holy Mother herself says about recollecting that incident, she couldn't stand that. Hungry stomachs could not brook delay. She says, one day a low-caste girl came running. Her hair was not combed properly because there was no oil with her, I think, and she had bloodshot eyes. She looked like a lunatic. But Holy Mother says how much hungry she was. Perhaps 2-3 days she had no food. So she ran to the tub where some rice dirt was soaked. And those rice dirt she started eating. This rice dust is soaked in a water in a tank to feed the cattle there. But this girl came running there and she started eating it. Then people from inside shouted at her, come here inside, my dear, we've got khichdi, eat this khichdi. And because she was so hungry, she ran there and she started eating. After some time, putting 2-3 helps, then she could start hearing what others are calling her. Then she went and mother fed her nice khichdi there. Then she ate. And then after swallowing some rice dirt, did she hear that call. So dreadful was the famine. Here we cannot forget the famine that came much later in Calcutta. The famine that came in Calcutta was man-made famine. The history says very clearly how during this British Raj we had the famine, and during that famine days our sister Nivedita was in the forefront to help the people to serve them. When we read the life of Sister Nivedita, we find how the feeling for humanity, a lady coming from all the way from Ireland to India and going there becoming the disciple of Swami Vivekananda, she had shared the same feeling what Swamiji shared for his brothers and sisters in India. This lady, she went there and Swamiji asked her, can you help me in this famine relief work? And that was a great relief work was done. She used to go there and feed the people. And one day it is said that when she saw a poor man, that his child could not even take milk. There was no money to buy the milk. And she said she used to drink milk only at that time and little fruits. And the money that she would spend for purchasing milk, she said, let the money go to buy the milk for this child. I shall give gladly my money. And she gave up that. It was wonderful. Her sacrifice in India for the Indian sisters and brothers and for the children there is simply unimaginable. A foreigner coming to India like this and taking a country as her own. That's why in her, when she passed away in Darjeeling, in that Samadhi place, it is written, a plaque has been put there, it said, "Here lies Sister Nivedita, who gave her all to India." It's something very rarely you find a woman coming from a foreign country giving her all to a nation. And what was that spirit that imbued Nivedita also with this interesting aspect of sharing with the humanity? If you see that, she was earlier also, in Nivedita's life also we see how she used to attend to the needs of her own friends in her young age. And she has been brought up in doing good to others. And later when she came in contact with Swamiji, she understood what a heart can be for others. She says when she went with Swamiji in his tours, including Kashmir, etc., she writes her wanderings with the monk. And in that book she says how Swamiji used to feel for the poor around. And that spirit caught Sister Nivedita also. And readily she came out to help the people in those famine-ridden days. Here you find, in Holy Mother life we find that she had a side which explained very clearly how she had the feeling for humanity, and also in those childhood days how she manifested her divinity. That's why her own mother, every mother is said to know her daughter very well, because when daughter comes from school, she would know what has happened in the school. Simply by looking at the girl, a mother can say that. But here we find Shyama Sundari Sevi exclaiming that, "Well, my dear daughter, who are you? I wonder who you really are." Because sometimes she sees the divine aspect of this little girl, sometimes she sees the human aspect of this little girl. So the mother is confused. Who is this girl? How wonderful this is. And in those times, irritated by this compliment, mother would just brush aside and she would retort to her mother, "Who am I? Who can I be?" And she would make fun. "Have I grown 4 hands like any deity?" Because in our Hinduism we have got deities with 4 hands. 2 hands deities also we are seeing, but 4 hands are very common. And even 8 hands, 10 hands like this, Dashabhuja, Ashtabhuja, all those we know that. So, why are you looking at me in surprise? Why are you asking this question, who am I really? That means am I a deity? Do I have extra hands? Like that mother used to make fun. So, it is Shyama Sundari used to say later that Sarada may have a daughter like you in my next life also. That is a great wish of Shyama Sundari, and the daughter would make fun of that with a show of anger, of course, that she would say, "Why do you want to drag me down again?" So that also shows, with these type of small incidents, Swami Gambhiranji has brought out very beautifully the Holy Mother's manifestation as divine at some of the incidences, and how she was down to earth as a human also. So when these two things got together, and he comes to a wonderful conclusion, and according to this author, he says very clearly that the girlhood days of the Holy Mother were made surprisingly singular. Singular means here that this incidents, that girlhood days, the incidents happened in those girlhood days were extraordinary by a strange combination of divinity and humanity. He doesn't stop there. He further adds, with a predominance of the former as it were. That means in most of the incidents that has been recollected here, that the author comes to a safe conclusion that the divinity aspect has been predominant in her life. So the second chapter is over here. We shall start the third chapter next week. Om Kripam Kuru Mahadevi Suteshu Pranateshu Cha चरणाश्रयदानेन कृपामयी नमोस्तुते। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम तत्सत्। श्री रामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।